Good evening, everyone. My name is Zara Jibril, and I work with CAID Somali Week Festival 2020 team. We are excited to present this special evening commissioned by Tower Hamlet Council, titled Resilience, the Aftermath of COVID-19 in East End London. Without a doubt, this year has been one of the toughest so far, as we have experienced the unfolding of a worldwide pandemic like no other seen in many generations. And this has affected the Somali community around the world greatly, especially in the UK. CAID has, like so many art organizations, been massively impacted by the pandemics in terms of sustainability, funding during the crisis, and losing the interactive aspect of running an arts organization. On a more personal note, CAID staff members have seen firsthand the devastating impact of this virus through the loss of our friends, loved ones, and the former guests to our events and pillars of the community, particularly in East London. With us tonight, we have Safiya Jama from the Women Inclusive team, poets Ahmed Diriye, Mohammed, and Yasin Hassan. We will start the evening with a discussion around the different responses, particularly from the community in East London, and different ways that the community has come together to try and cope with the impact of COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdowns and the government measurements. With that in mind, I am pleased to welcome Safiya Jama, who founded the Women Inclusive team in 2005. She has degrees in community development from Birkbeck University, and she's also a qualified mental health trainer. So hopefully we'll be able to get some insight from her in terms of how to cope with COVID and how it's exacerbated the situation. Safiya is also the owner of Zaman Lounge, a Somali restaurant in West London. She's on the board of directors for Tower Hamlets. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, all of you here with us. Your frontline work has been truly inspiring, Safiya. Can you tell us more about what you have experienced and how COVID has affected the Somali community, especially here in Tower Hamlets, where your work is based?
So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Really happy to be with all of you guys today. I mean, Tower Hamlets is really close to me. From primary school to secondary school, it's my borough, I call it my home. Had my lovely children here, and so I'm very much a part of the community. And I think one of the reasons that we started the Women's Inclusive team was it's sort of a remedy of all the stuff that I grew up as a young girl, not able to attend youth sessions or not able to do activities, and sort of trying to create a safe environment that's culturally and religiously acceptable. And so I think Women's Inclusive team has been an organisation that hears and sees and responds to that need, and everything that we've done so far responds to that. And I think because of that ethos, because of that vision, because of that motivation, that drive, I guess during COVID, we responded even more. The organisation has been established for 16 years. And in that 16 years, I guess we've started from things like from youth sessions to early years to the mental health facilities that we provide. And in COVID, I guess with the rapport and the connections that we had with the community, we were able to give a very rapid response. And we were quite lucky to have both Somali and non-Somalis as amazing volunteers that went above and beyond to ensure that we were able to serve those that were very vulnerable in our community.
And exactly what you guys were you doing? I know you were doing a food bank and you were actually cooking meals and delivering to vulnerable people in East London.
So yes, so I think firstly, if I just go back when the lockdown took place, sadly there was a number of daytime clubs or lunchtime clubs that the elderly residents used to go to. So Somali men and Somali women were able to have this one healthy meal that was cooked for them. And they had that social atmosphere. It wasn't just the food, it was the food for the soul as well. And they had that regularly going there. And suddenly, obviously, COVID took place and all of them were told to stay at home. Everything was closed. and actually nothing was in place for them. They relied on that solely. So I think initially it was about how do we get food to them? So how do we make sure that they don't get hungry? And how do we make sure that they don't end up going out trying to look for food? And at Poplar Hark, I cannot emphasize on how responsive and supportive, motivated they've been. They allowed us to actually provide hot meals for those residents. And then we had a whole load of people that were volunteers, and actually the volunteers were all coordinated, led and given to us freely from Bike Works, which is a charity based in Tower Hamlets that normally they do bike lessons for kids, but they repurposed their whole provision, and they were able to deliver to Somali women and men in their own house, in their own homes. And the criteria was quite clear. It was obviously they had to live by themselves, didn't have any support of family, and they would get food. And I remember when non-Somalis bought the food, they would call and say, is the food halal? And we're like, yes, the food's from us. And so it was such a beautiful learning thing. Then we realized, hold on, you've got to kind of call them up and make sure they got the food. So we got a few Somalis and non-Somalis actually volunteering, calling them up. And actually what's so beautiful is as some of them would pick up the telephone call, they would practice their little English with them. And when we said, should we give you someone who speaks Somali? They're like, no, we want to practice. So wallahi, there was so much bonding. But from those telephone calls, we realized that, hold on, it's not just hot meals that they need. They also need their an or their bread, their milk, and all those other things. And I guess the notion of food banks started off from there. And when we asked them, there's food banks in Tower Hamlets, why are you not going to those ones? It was either language barriers, or we weren't sure if the food was halal, or what is a food bank. Or one old man said they gave us something haram, so I never went back there again. And so I think this culturally sensitive food bank that had things that they were familiar with was really important. And so the food bank started off. So we had, during COVID, we had the telephone befriending, the food bank, as well as the hot meals. And that still runs actually until today, which has been an absolute, wallahi, an amazing sort of bringing communities together. And the community kitchen actually was led by Somali aunties who were cooking, especially in Ramadan, cooking amazing food. And obviously you have to have your samosas in Ramadan. So you had all these corporate Adan people making samosas with our aunties, and then them making flatbreads, and they send me pictures saying, look what I can make, Safiya. So wallahi, a real community coming together. And since then, I guess we've started a free tuition for kids that we've partnered with Barnardo's. And again, that's another issue. It's not just about the vulnerable people, it's about academically how kids have fallen behind, and how do you make sure these kids are not disadvantaged more than what they were before. So we run that alongside of many other activities, as well as running our advice and guidance, our nursery, and all the other stuff that the organisation runs. So it's been an interesting, challenging, wallahi, hard, like you said, we witnessed people dying, and I think had we have not stepped in, I guess that more people would have suffered. The mental well-being of people, not having that contact with people, or food. When you give someone food, again, it's not just about feeding them physically in terms of giving them nutrition, but also showing them that you care and that you've got their back. And I think as a community in Tower Hamlets, alhamdulillah, we've really responded to that. You know, the volunteers, the young people are still giving out. I don't know if you've watched or seen our social media, but they've designed or developed what's called the H4H, which is help for homeless. And it's uni kids that go out every Friday that just give out all the excess food that we have to homeless people. So there's a real bringing together of communities and generations and nationalities, and breaking those barriers that we've had, I guess, in different age groups and different communities as well. So it's been lots of silver lining in a very challenging time, I would say.
I was going to say that just hearing you speak, I literally got goosebumps from kind of like how inspiring all the different things that you've managed to pull together, and with the community as well, and how everybody's been chipping in. SubhanAllah, it's absolutely phenomenal. And it's, I guess, very, it fills us with hope with, you know, with the announcement now that we're going into a second lockdown, and kind of with winter and sort of all that worries. How do you think you guys are going to continue to respond and with the added pressures as well?
So I think, alhamdulillah, we've got an amazing centre that has all the facilities that are able to kind of, I guess, deliver food. Poplar Hark donated an amazing oven, by the way. I love the oven that we have there. You can put things in, it comes out within like 20 minutes. So I think we have the capacity in terms of physically the location and the venue. I think what I am going to probably shout out is for more volunteers. And I think I have noticed that a lot of Somalis don't volunteer as much, and I think in comparison to the number of volunteers that we have, I would say volunteers are probably 30% roughly, maximum 40% are Somali. I think I would like to have more volunteers, and I think we're getting ready for that. So for us, it's very much about recruitment of volunteers. We knew that it was coming. I think we all kind of knew the things, you know, people are constantly isolated. So for example, if someone's isolating now and they've got symptoms of COVID, clearly they can't go out, and they're vulnerable people. We could provide food for them for a duration of 2 weeks to make sure that they don't starve, and also to make sure that, you know, if they can't go out for whatever reason, that we've got their back. So I think definitely more volunteers are needed. You know, donations, we've got GoFundMe pages, any support that people can give us, that's fantastic. But I always say to people, when we hear the word charity, we think charity is money, but it really isn't. Charity, wallahi, most importantly, it's about your hug, you know, your time, your passion, your intellectual ability, your support that you give someone. And that's the real charity. That's where the real sweat comes in, the hardship. And so it's so nice to see, you know, colleagues that are coming back from their jobs at 5 o'clock just to do their bike delivery, just to do their car delivery, just to do their walk-in delivery, wallahi. So I would urge colleagues, I guess, if clearly we have got another second lockdown, and that means that there's more people with I guess, vulnerabilities that need our help. So anyone who wants help, obviously constantly, Zahra, I'm asking for people to come and support us. And so I guess that's the only way we functioned before. There was a point of time where we were delivering 250 meals per day, hot meals per day that were being cooked. And I think it was 300 and something grocery or food bank. And that number will go up purely because the need is going to go up. And some people might need it for a short period of time. Some people, they're on 0-hour contracts, and when their job stops and they have to start benefits, there's a gap. And that gap means that they will starve if people don't give in. And I always say, Zahra, that people were hungry before COVID. It's just as a nation, we realize now. There was, you know, there's Odayal that sit in their house that would just have toast and shah. If they can't go to Makhayad, they're hungry. And so lack of nutrition is hunger. And so I think it's really important to say that together we are strong. And I always, wallahi, say this, if we all come together, we are very strong, and we're competent and capable of achieving something far greater than what we can imagine. So definitely, Zahra, I'd be shouting out for my brothers and sisters in the Somali community, for my fellow colleagues in different fields that can give an hour a week, you know, 2 hours a week, as well as obviously the aunties are more than willing to cook their baris and basta with passion, mashallah. So we'll definitely be ready for the challenge, inshallah, with support.
Inshallah. Thank you so much for that oversight. I think you've touched on a few things, so I'd like to bring in, so from an academic perspective, Mohammed Wright is a poet, but he's also a teacher and a co-founder of the online Black and Muslim in Britain video series, as well as the founder of the Unheard Words project focused on using poetry as a tool for interfaith engagement. Mohammed often explores the topic of faith, identity, politics, and masculinity in his poems. Engaging youth work and politics, Mohammed's poem for climate change, I Remember, was shortlisted for the Free Wells 2015, The Time Is Now Poetry Prize. Mohammed, welcome. You've heard all the inspiration and all the activities that Safiya and her organization are doing. What do you think of that, firstly, and from an academic perspective?
I mean, firstly, I'm very disappointed in myself as a former Tower Hamlets resident that I wasn't aware of such incredible work Sister Safiya and the community were doing. I mean, maybe it's because I didn't grow up in Tower Hamlets, so I was only there for like a year. But most of the lockdown period, I was living in Tower Hamlets. Now I live in the Hackney area, but some of that is really testament to the community spirit that was needed even before the lockdown measures, even before this pandemic kicked off. And that's where I strongly agree with Safiya that these were challenges that the community needed before. People were hungry before the pandemic. People were struggling financially, etc. So I think what it did, in particular to the Somali community in London, what it did is just highlight the inequalities that exist throughout the country, and especially marginalized communities and communities which were had various other challenges, whether it was socially, economically, and even staying physically active, which is my field in the world of teaching. I'm actually a PE teacher on top of my writing. my love affair with writing poetry. So I think, yeah, and in that perspective, there's some serious challenges, and it's really shone a light in a horror. It's unfortunate that it's taken a global pandemic to highlight those inequalities and those challenges that those communities face, but it's also brought out a wonderful silver lining, which I kind of maybe didn't realize the privilege until now. Realized that, you know, there really was some sort of silver lining, that there was more community spirit that we saw during the lockdown, and during periods in the pandemic when measures were lifted. It meant that more people could commit more to volunteering, and maybe that's where I kind of pinch myself in the worst way, and like, Mo, what were you doing during that period? Sure, as a teacher there was a lot of challenges for me during lockdown. Teaching via Zoom, Teams, online was some of the most exhausting and mentally draining experiences. So there were, I would imagine, for people in the Tower Hamlets community as well, that mental health would have been on the agenda, and very, very straining, not only for myself as a teacher, and I'm in a very privileged position that I'm a married person. I just live with my wife. I'm not accountable for any children. And I live fairly comfortably in that context. So, but I can imagine for those in the communities who live in London, who live in overcrowded housing, who have to have the need for food banks, have lost their jobs, those challenges are very, very real, and they're very stressful for the individual. So seeing the community support each other, I can imagine would have those positive mental health benefits. But it's been a really straining time, and we're going through a second lockdown now. To be fair, not that the first one has ever finished, and that's a real honest challenge overall. So I think now you've encouraged me, Sister Safiya, to get involved, especially now, like maybe like weekends, to volunteer. And I think someone's even asked a question in the Q&A of how they can volunteer. So Safiya, please do share your links. I would benefit, and people tuning in would also benefit.
So I will, when we get to the question and answer section, then I guess there are questions already. Where can people sign up to help with the work that Women Inclusive Team are doing? So we'll come back to the questions towards the end. Yeah. Mohammed, do you want to share any of your work with us?
Yeah, I'd happily. I think from the point of view of creatives, I think there was this loaded pressure, actually, not just creatives, but also not just those in the creative field, but also those who are academics, writers, what else? Any other field where people can demonstrate a creative outlet or intellectually put their words onto page. There was this massive expectation that lockdown would mean there was more time for it. You know, oh, you're in lockdown, you're in some sort of isolated bubble, which means that you are privileged with time and you can get loads of work done. But actually, in contrast, that's never really been the case. And that's probably linked to mental health challenges and challenges for people to deliver. But actually, being a creative during lockdown has been, honestly, one of the hardest things. During the lockdown period, between March to July, really, before measures were lifted, I got nothing done. I got absolutely nothing done. I had no time for writing. I was drained. I had no ideas. I had no creative output. I genuinely didn't. And I feel like a lot of poets who I've spoken to, I've also felt the same way. It's been one of the hardest things as a creative. And it's only been recently that I've been able to start writing again for a very, very long time. And I'll share this poem that I wrote. And I feel like this poem I'm going to read is really going to encapsulate how dark this period has been for a lot of us. And I really hope it's not, I've tried my best, and I don't think it's worked at all, but it's a very dark poem, and it's a poem that isn't very me, but it's also a poem that actually demonstrates what it's felt like for creatives during this pandemic. So it hasn't got a title, but I'll just read it anyway. Time has never felt more paused. Tomorrow's guarantee is yesterday's comedy sketch. We've been at a standstill since 4 p.m. Announcements became a memorial silent disco, a repeated party, a cold party, a morbid party for one. For some, the home has been a warm place in the arms of love. The laughs, the binges, the space. For others, a battleground against the odds, a 9-to-5 fatigue, a broken cassette, an email away from the livelihood of death. Promised light. The proof is in a new moon, a rising sun, Hoya's call, the morning prayer. Because by time, mankind isn't lost. But by time, we are always promised ease. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. That's amazing. I want to also bring in Ahmed, who's known as Easy with the Pen on social media. He's also an East London native poet, and he has built a steady collection of politically charged pieces that carry his trademark wordplay and subtle storytelling. He was part of the summer project that Cade did, Confined but Creative, where Freshie, his poem, which talked about the plight of first-generation immigrants as they acclimatized to the British system and the resistance that came with it. Ahmed, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, guys.
Assalam. What do you want to add to the discussion today? You've heard what Muhammad and Safiya has.
Yeah, I've just been blown away by two amazing people, Muhammad's beautiful poem and the beautiful work that Sister Zahra's doing. Is Zahra?
Safiya.
Safiya, sorry, yeah. No, I'm definitely...
No, I'm the audience.
No, I'm just here sat in awe of the two of them, mashallah, doing the amazing work they are. And yeah, I just wanted to hopefully read a few poems, inshallah, and add to the poems. Yeah. So, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name's Ahmed Dirya. Some of you guys may know me by my full name. Others may know me as Mehdi. But I think, inshallah, everyone should know me as Easy with the Pen. I'm a poet from East London, a Somali East London boy. And inshallah, tonight I'm reading two poems for you guys. The first one's slightly shorter. It's talking about where I've lived for the last 20 years now. I'm a Stratford boy. I've been a native in this town for almost 21 years. Proud. And the second one is called Black Deaths. So I'll start with the first one. Bismillah. This is where I'm from. Council house for violent tenants. Benefit grabbers and repeat offenders. Crackheads and gang members. We all share the same province. This is where I'm from. A dark side of the city that you won't see on TV, where drugs tear through my community and knife crime is only a concern during local elections, where candidates use our fallen to reinforce their agendas. This is where I'm from. Where our healthcare is a heated discussion, where our safety falls short of their referendums, where our children have to play in concrete jungles because our youth clubs lack public funding. This is where I'm from. Where young men are incarcerated for petty crimes, where they'll meet up with their fathers behind bars to serve time, where young girls are objectified and over-sexualized, where forgotten children turn into absent-minded parents. This is where I'm from. Where it doesn't matter if you're academically gifted, when big businesses only hire from within, as white privilege continues to exist in a system as broken as this. This is where I'm from. Where there is no justice, just us. Here we are painted with the same brush, left to fight against the same odds. Thank you. That is Stratford, short and sweet. And then I'm going to move straight into, inshallah, the second poem, which is a little bit longer. This is called Black Deaths in Custody. Black souls seldom see freedom when we are hunted by our oath keepers, who sever our voices for their secrets, because our blood is stained with impeachment. Families are ill-informed of our mistreatment when key witnesses start mysteriously disappearing, where our evidence is implicated before our hearings, so they bury our inquest and legal proceedings. Government insurgents stuck to official reports, so our testimonies become inadmissible in court. The judge and jury are quick to retort and support the Prime Minister who's done this before. Broadsheet papers bury our children with the illest of intentions. Journalists condemn our suffering as misguided vengeance. They blame police brutality on racial tensions to keep the public from asking any questions. The media sells our pain as entertainment. Slave movies captivate the nation but fail to make any changes. 12 years a slave, 12 years later we're still in chains. How many black men must die in police custody before this epidemic is addressed publicly? When will we question the inaction of our politicians who stand by while this continues under supervision? All the while, the public is misled by their televisions, programmed to see my community as vindictive. This divide nullifies their ability to empathize between you and I and creates a picket fence between you and I. So you become acclimatized to their social conditioning, where black on black crime is a byproduct of our derelict system, where our freedom of speech is met with resistance, where any sign of protest is policed with criminal convictions. While Boris Johnson and his party fatten their pockets off the corporate prison of while Boris Johnson and his party fatten their pockets off the corporate prison industry that spins labor for profit. So you can see why he's conservative about making a change when he's making a livelihood extorting our young men in vain, then draws a crowd when we become frustrated. He speaks of then draws a crowd when we become frustrated. He speaks of emancipation, then asks for our patience. He pleads for peace, but how can our oppressors liberate us? How can the same ones who enslave us be our saviors? You can't wash Mark Duggan's blood off the streets. You can't expect me to trust the police when I see in the CCTV from the crime scene where officers shot to kill an innocent man so blindly. Now these same murderers are being held so highly when they've robbed a son, a brother, a father from his family. So I promise you, our hollow screams will haunt Parliament's doors until our plan for change can no longer be ignored. The Bible says love thy neighbor, but how can I love a man who pimps me out for labor? As long as sorrow fills a mother's echo, we won't rest until justice serenades our ghetto. Thank you.
Thank you. That is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Ahmed, Hamad was telling us about how the pandemic had an impact on his creative. Do you think the pandemic has allowed you to be more creative than usual, or do you agree with Hamad that it sort of crowds you and almost stagnates you because you're so...
I definitely understand where Mohammed's coming from. I think it can be frustrating at times, but for me personally, it's given me the time to be able to actually sit down and get things done. I think I'm someone that the last thing I do is get down and start writing. I'll find a million things to do before I get to a pen and page. So alhamdulillah, the good thing I was able to take away from the pandemic and the lockdown itself is to have some time to flesh out my thoughts and put pen to paper. So yeah, otherwise, if it wasn't the lockdown, I promise you none of this stuff would have got done. So alhamdulillah, for me, it gave me the when life was on pause, I could start to finally pull out the pages. So yeah, alhamdulillah, it was good for me. It was good for me.
Alhamdulillah. And I want to bring Safiya in because you're a mental health trainer. So what can Somalis do to stay sane and stay safe in this second lockdown for the second wave? And do you have any tips in terms of how, you know, we can look out for each other, and particularly for the vulnerable within our community, particularly around mental health, as we continue to all isolate and, you know, stay away from our normal routines?
I think my first thing to my fellow brothers and sisters is to say that mental health affects us just like it affects other people. You know, we hear the Islamists saying, we're Muslims, and it's like, that's nothing to do with it. So just like we physically get sick, we mentally, you know, our brains can also, I guess, have challenges. And without, I guess, mental health, there is no physical health. And it's really important for people to really connect those two. And just like we nourish ourselves in terms of physically, and we're constantly making sure that we take care of ourselves, you know, physical exercise, eating well, you know, these are things that are good for the mind and the emotions and the brain. And unfortunately, I guess, COVID has had a huge impact on our community. Our community is very much, I guess, a social community that mixes with people, that goes out, that, you know, goes to events, you know, just like I said, you know, that coffee that, or the Ashi Islam, or Faristan, you know, or the Igbo specifically, that's the soul of our community. And I think when COVID came, that was taken away. And I guess digitally, our older community, our vulnerable community weren't able to kind of keep online or keep communication. Because I guess by saying, look, we shouldn't be mixing with people physically, doesn't mean that socially we shouldn't be socializing. But because they didn't have the means, they weren't able to do that. So what I am going to say, and I think many of you have probably heard, that the mental health of many people will be affected as a result of the first lockdown, let alone the second lockdown. And I guess years to come after that, we will be affected. There's people that have, as a community, as well as the Somali community, when someone dies, it's not just my immediate family, it's a community member. So we're all grieving. Like you said, Zahra, at the beginning, we've lost very important, well-known people in our historic as Somalis. You know, or the Yashi Islami, the seamen that we all knew, the uncle that everybody knew. So we're going to be grieving. It's going to take a long time for us to kind of, digest that. And then sadly, I think we don't have enough frontline staff that are mental health specialists that can support us, counsellors that can enable us to talk about the bereavement or, feeling lonely, depression. The Islamists will say to you, depress me here, depress you, it happens, and you do. And I think it's about educating ourselves, educating our community to say, actually, these are the signs that you need to look out for. And I think most importantly, every single person can do their little bit, even if you're isolating at home, 110%, you can get involved in a telephone befriending scheme of just ringing people and just ringing them because they are humans and you are a human and you care and you want to show that caring. And it's just to say, how are you? Which is really important, just to have that human contact with people. It's really important. And know that actually it's okay to feel low and it's okay to be a little bit down. And actually, if you communicate and you go early and get help, you're more likely to be in control of your mental well-being. And also read lots of things about self-care, making sure, how do you look after your mind? We read often how to look after your muscles and how to do this, but we don't really invest in time and energy and not knowledge into that. So 110%, what I would say to people, it is stressful. We've been through, I guess historically, people will be talking about this period for many years, and I don't think we've even digested what we've gone through. You hear about historic, but actually we've gone and is still going through a historic, traumatic, tragedy in terms of the mankind, in terms of death, the amount of people that have been lost, in terms of our brothers mentioned beautifully, in terms of the inequalities that we face. And I think not just COVID, but it's also now that we know that we're disadvantaged more than before. We know that the system isn't fair. So that anger and frustration can obviously affect your mental well-being. My key thing is to say, number one, your mind is the most powerful thing that you have, and you have to protect it and preserve it. What does that look like? You need to research, you need to find out. Not something that works for me might not work for anyone else. And so it's really important to know that. You need to find out what self-care is, exercising is good, going for walks, just walk around the block and get a bit of fresh air, look up and say, alhamdulillah, the creation of God, the leaves, the plants, the birds, pay attention to all those things, which is really important, wallahi. And if you're spiritually connected, find that connection. I think just, that's really powerful to say that actually for people, regardless of, I guess, what religion or faith they're from, having that spiritual connection is powerful. And if you don't, a lot of people do I've forgotten the word now, where you sort of sit and reflect and meditate. There you go. So meditation, whatever works for you, I think just stepping out of whatever challenges or whatever's around you now and just saying, actually, this time is for me. And something that Brother Muhammad touched on, actually, a lot of people, they're at home with kids, and alhamdulillah, some of us don't, are not in that situation, but some mums are suffering, wallahi. They might be single mums in overcrowded house with lots of kids running around, and actually I don't have the ability to teach my child, and my child needs me to teach them or to guide them or to support them, and actually they need a bit of space to learn, or I don't have that in my house. And actually the GCSE give us, so how do I support them with that? So I can only imagine, I think, give yourself time out. Leave the house alone, look after your mental well-being. And just remember that the most important thing is the relationship or the communication you have with your kids, because, ultimately you can't be a superhero and do everything. So it's almost like knowing what your limits are and asking for help, knowing what help is out there, and making sure that that actually there's signs, if you feel low, if you're not eating well, that these are signs that, hey, you need to come and talk to someone. And if anyone wants to talk to anyone, I think my email's in the chat room now, just, reach out, communicate, and we will definitely connect you with someone. And the other thing I would say to my fellow brothers and sisters who have studied psychology, for example, at university, we're currently doing a program, because I'm a strong believer for us to change the inequalities that we face. So these systems or stakeholders that we're talking about that don't reflect us, the only way that we can change that is making sure that we are a part of that. When decisions are being made, that we're at the table where those decisions are made. So please make sure that you get involved in places. So there's a program now that I've been lobbying for a long time, where they've agreed now to try and support Somali young people that have finished their psychology degree, NHS program, fully funded, to become counsellors, because that's the only way we can have someone who looks like us, that will understand the dynamics. Because when we get sick, it's not just, you know, the medication. You have to remember you need someone who understands your cultural background. And a lot of us carry trauma, direct trauma or indirect trauma, whether it's the FGM or whether it's the civil war that our parents have experienced, or whether it's a bereavement that hasn't been dealt with. So I think it's really important for us to understand that. And so the only way that we can make a change is to get involved. I get involved in so many different things that have nothing to do with the work that I directly do, but just so that I can make a change and make sure that those people in positions of power hear Somali, they hear women, they hear Black, they hear Muslims, they hear Tower Hamlets, they hear all the things that reflects us in terms of an identity. So there's every single one of us can do something. And I think it's important to look after yourself academically, your mental well-being, but remember that as a community, and I always love this word that the aunties use, which is dantagutka, which means that what's in the interest of the wider community. So always work towards that, as well as working towards what your personal dreams and goals and needs are, but never forget what your community needs as well.
Thank you, Safiya. And just, it's in the question and A section, the email address, contact@wit.org.uk. As Safiya said, last time they had the majority of their volunteers were non-Somali, and all the elderly Somali members were asking, you know, whether the food is halal when, you know, different ethnicities deliver. So hopefully, I hope that people who are watching can email Safiya and volunteer their time, even if it's just a couple of hours. No time is too small, and you can all make, even if you can't cook, I'm sure there are other ways that you can help. I also just wanted to say that Safiya touched on kind of like the community and the culture and kind of how all this clashed together within our community. And I wanted to say, in the last lockdown, where we've had a couple of deaths in East London, the community in East London all know each other, particularly the elders from the mosque, from the cement places. So when one of them passed away, one of the most difficult things for them to deal with mentally has been not being there for each other physically, not doing their usual taxi, not doing the support that they would normally do. And some went ahead putting, you know, themselves further at risk. Others, you know, it cost them a lot of distress not to be able to comfort each other in that way. So try to spread awareness as much as you can as well. I want to bring back Muhammad, because I think you have another poem to share with us before we go back to the public Q&A session.
So I think it was Mehdi. Mehdi said he had 2 poems.
Ah, okay. Sorry, I was told, no, he already did both of his poems. Hold on. I think I got it wrong. Ah, sorry. My bad. Okay, so we'll go down to the question and answers in that case. Thank you, sorry. I thought everybody was doing 2 poems tonight. So on the questions coming from Facebook, the second lockdown has just been announced today. Are you more anxious than before, or are we better prepared as individuals and as a community? So I guess you can all have a go at answering that question.
I'll start. I think we have enough experience now, unfortunately. We have a lot of experience now in how to respond. And I think a lot of us, we can look back at things that we wish we either could have achieved, things that we could have done more, especially in our community. So learning today that there are so many organizations doing fantastic community work is important. I think for me, I mean, as I work as a teacher in school, this problem won't be as big as before, but in the summer lockdown, it was really helpful for me to call parents from the kids at my school who are Somali, especially for those parents who English wasn't so great, and how I could assist them on that front, academically, helping those children on task. I think that advantage has allowed us to maintain, as teachers, build really strong relationships with those Somali parents. So in the case that there is another opportunity, well, if in the case that there is school closures, then a lot of Somali teachers have built excellent relationships with these families where they can help even more now. And I think that's probably one lesson I'm going to take more and take advantage of, to make sure that I am there for Somali families, especially for those who have more than one or two siblings, and see how we can help. So those lessons learned from the first lockdown will allow us to make those sort of changes that for me anyway, want to make this time around.
And Hamad, a specific question coming through for you. Do you still write football poetry? Your takes on Twitter are hilarious.
You know what, I've got a few. I think I've only actually got one that I'm very happy with. But it's an area that I'm looking to tap into, because even during the summer, during lockdown, when there wasn't much football, there was a lot of conversations within the poetry community, or within my network in particular, to have more poems about football. So if there's any luck, then I'll definitely keep in touch with my social media page, because I would definitely be leading something like that. Thank you.
And Ahmed, will you make more of your poems into videos? Freshie is top 3 video of the year for me.
Whoever said the Jazakallah khair. Yes, I'm finishing off the one you just heard, the longer poem, Black Deaths. That one is being shot as we speak. We've done about, alhamdulillah, maybe about 60% of the shooting. I've got a really, like, one of my close friends. I've just happened to have really talented friends, alhamdulillah, and he's very, very amazing, very skilled. So we finished about 60% of it. We've shot one more scene last Wednesday. We've got 2 more to do, inshallah, and that's going out. And then whatever feedback we get from that, we're going to go straight into another one straight away. So there's plenty of videos. It's all coming out this year, next year, inshallah, 100%. Videos are coming.
Make sure you tag us in it at Cade Somali Week Festival. And Safiya, you are an absolute inspiration. I've known you since I was a kid, literally. I want to ask, on a personal note, how do you manage to balance your motherhood with all the amazing work that you do? You literally seem like you have more time than all of us combined with all that you do.
I think I'm lucky in a sense that my kids are older now, and so all of them are either in primary school or in university. So I think I'm lucky in that sense, that they obviously are able to feed themselves, or they can look after themselves. But also I think I have family and community that really support me. And ultimately, I think the passion is really strong for me, and that obviously keeps me going and makes me able to kind of go above and beyond, and maybe do what, I guess, when you're passionate or motivated by something, you're able to go the extra mile. But most importantly, I think, I'm a positive role model for my kids. That's how I see myself first and foremost. You want your kids to kind of look back and say, actually, my mum, I want to be like my mum, hopefully. They haven't said that to me yet. I'm making dua that they will say that to me. But I think it's definitely one of those things that you want to keep that balance going with your deen, with your family, with, your charity work, and obviously helping people. And I'm a strong believer, actually, that if I don't do it, nobody would. And I think it's just those concepts or ideas that's embedded in me. If I don't do it, then who will? And I think as a community sometimes, or as I guess, I don't know if it's a new culture or whatever, but now it's like you constantly hear people saying, oh, don't worry, someone else will do it. It's like, no, if you don't do it, I think this is really important for people to really drill that in. If I don't do it, no one else would. And if I don't do it, why should someone else do it? And I think it's really important to kind of have that. But it is challenging, wallahi, especially when they hit teenagers, as some of you might know, teenagers, and we've all been there as well, Sahara. It can be quite challenging. But I guess being organised is the only advice that I constantly give myself, let alone anyone else.
Oh, may Allah preserve you and make it easy for you, inshallah. Does the internet and social media contribute to our well-being and in producing poetry? So I guess all of you can answer that as well. I
was going to say, in terms of like well-being, I think social media, I mean, I'm a crazy user. I'm a bit of a nuthead on social media. So,
I follow you on
but
Twitter.
I think
It's quite hilarious.
but I think with social media, actually, during this period of like pandemic lockdowns, etc., there were times where it gave me a lot of like good moments. It gave me a lot of life. I mean, I'm not on TikTok, but I saw some fantastic TikTok videos shared on platforms like Twitter or Facebook, and a lot of the times it really did make me smile. It made me quite happy. And in fact, just because my family, I'm a South Londoner, so my family all in South London. In the lockdown, basically did not see them at all until restrictions were lifted. So we had lots of like Zoom parties as a family. So we had like all came together on what do you call it, on like FaceTime or Zoom, and we would like, when it was like birthdays, everyone come on the call, we'd be singing, loads of fun, playing games. I know for my wife, we would have weekly family Zoom calls because her family is from Wales, so we would connect. And there was moments where I was like, Alhamdulillah, like I know things are hard, but these kind of moments are these little sparks moments are giving us such real joy. So those were moments that I really made the most of. I mean, creatively, I did struggle, but I think other moments, you know, sometimes it's good to put down the pen and engage with the world outside the page, and that was positive for me. But there were really some really good moments for my well-being and mental health, most certainly.
Safiya?
I think social media is an interesting one. Obviously, I go in and check every so often. It could be the best tool and it could be the worst tool ever. And I think it's really important for people to kind of understand that sometimes we can kind of almost go in there trying to suppress the challenges or the reality that surround us and go into this untrue and sometimes quite painful world as well. People are really trolling and being negative to people as well. So I think it's really important to know there's good in that, there's obviously bad, and just balancing that, which is really important. But actually in terms of well-being, there's lots of things that you can go on to, like Mental Health England has lots of useful tools that people can go on to and live and work. So I normally deliver like Mental Health First Aid, which is a youth version, Mental Health First Aid adult version. And so there's so much free resources, and believe you and me, they're really good, and they don't give out much resources for free, but now there's a lot of stuff up there that you can benefit. And Living Works, which is assist the suicide intervention. So there's a lot of good things that you can get from those platforms. But obviously you do need to sometimes switch off as well from the real raw reality that we're in. So social media can be a really positive thing. In my work, I'm in a 8 a.m. every morning meeting, followed by 8:30, followed by 9:30. So I'm constantly on lots of Zoom, so I can get a lot of stuff done at the same time as being in the community kitchen and helping the aunties with the chopping and whatever else that they need to do. So I think it's helped me be more productive. And so I think for me, it's been really helpful. I think Zoom, everyone's going to be on Zoom after, whether everything's back to normal or not, we're all on Zoom. And I think it's been a beautiful thing where we're learning, socializing, and constantly learning new ways of using Zoom and other communication platform. So it's really good. I am trying to get the older generation to be on there more. So we were quite lucky. We had some computers and tablets and stuff that were donated. But then it's like, actually, you've got to go to the aunties and show them the uncles and say, this is it. And then you think, hey, they haven't got internet. So now you're stuck again. So it's been really powerful watching. Recently we had a donation for Poplar Harker for some computers, and I think they had it from a corporate company, and setting it up and getting someone, so the block that they lived in had internet, and so we were able to, and the huge impact that has had on this old man has been absolutely powerful. Wallahi. So absolutely powerful, needed, keeps us connected, can be negative, so keep the balance going.
Thank you. Lots of light-hearted comments coming in. Ahmed, somebody said, explain the wrestling photo or a wrestling belt. And also, I think the second question for you is, what practical advice would you give somebody who is just starting out? I think they mean in terms of the videos and the poetry.
Okay. The wrestling photo, I don't know which one they're referring to. Is it the birthday one?
There's
I think it
multiple
might.
ones?
Yeah, there's one. I think I had a Halloween outfit where I dressed as The Rock, and he was wearing like it was incredible. So I think it was either a Halloween outfit or it was my birthday, and a friend decided to do like an homage. The same guy that directs my videos decided to do an edit of me and him on two really big guys. It was hilarious. But on a more serious note, the advice I would give to anyone starting up right now. What advice? I'd probably just say, take your time. That's what I would say. Most important is just take your time. Don't rush to put content out. Don't rush to just write at your own pace and trust the process. I'm 27 now, so I have been writing maybe consistently for about 4 or 5 years. And even at 21, 22, I had content I wanted to release. I wanted to put things out there, I wanted to publish. I was very excited, very giddy, but I didn't do that. I held off from it. And if I were to put out stuff then, I think I'd be looking back and be a bit embarrassed. Not that it's bad, but I think the maturity and the growth that I've shown from then to now is something that I can be proud of. And that is the most practical advice I say to anyone. Just take your time, don't rush. Meet people. People are there to be to socialize. You can learn from others so much as well. I think I've learned the most or acquired the most skills from others when I've gone to other shows and other spoken word, open mic nights. And I've seen people just blow me away completely and given me different ideas of tropes and topics and themes and cadences and flows and ideas and that I didn't even think existed until I actually saw them live. So just go out there, meet people, have fun. Don't take yourself too seriously, and inshallah things will just fall into place.
That is amazing advice.
I wanted to contribute and add to that question as well. It's a really good question.
Let me add a second one for you as well, because there's a few, and then you can.
I was just gonna go on to like where should you start kind of thing.
Go then.
So mate, I was gonna say one, don't let anyone tell you how to poetry. I think what you find in for new people is like, they don't know if when they write something, they don't know if this qualifies as poetry. And sometimes you get some very difficult spaces where people tell you that your work isn't good enough, or they might say that your work isn't poetry, or they know what proper poetry is. And you find it in often very bourgeois communities, bourgeois writing sessions, sometimes even in my younger years. This was actually how I came across poetry during GCSE years, until I came across great work in the anthology by John Agard. And I was like, oh wow, like I didn't know you could write, I didn't know poetry could be like this. The only reason I was able to respond to that is because I was only shown a particular type of poetry. So don't let anyone tell you how to write. I mean, getting tips on improving the writing is very different, but this idea that poetry can be a certain way is very false. And secondly, get involved in as many online poetry events, open mic nights, find your own writing community. There's so many good open mic nights like Online Boxed In, Shoreditch Boxed In. They do great online poetry events. Poetry and Shah. There's so many good places where you can have the opportunity to share your work and also build bonds, relationships with other poets as well.
That is very constructive advice, because often it can be very off-putting and nerve-wracking when you're starting off. So it's very, very good. Mohammed, I saw a funny tweet you did the other day about small nikah gang. What advice would you give newly married couples during a pandemic?
Oh man, I mean, it's actually funny because I actually did have a small nikah, but my
it was pre-pandemic. It was
exactly.
Now it's important.
So wow, best advice. I mean, Alhamdulillah, I think I spoke about this as well. A lot of people were talking about the challenges for married couples during the pandemic, for those who did have challenges, and how it can be. I've heard some really heartbreaking stories, but I've also heard some really beautiful stories, really, really beautiful stories about how the amount of time that they had with their spouse was, reignited their marriage, or they were absolutely thrilled to have so much time with their spouse. Like for me, for example, other than being a teacher, I'm also a football coach. So sometimes I get home at 8, 9 o'clock, and then on top of that, I'm working Monday to Friday. My wife works from home. So the lockdown period was really, alhamdulillah, it was wonderful to have so much time with my wife. And when I went back to school in September, it was a genuine bummer. Like we were so bummed out that we lost that time, and we were able to reconnect such wonderful time together. So my advice is, and most importantly, with your spouse at home, be very patient with each other, listen, create opportunities to watch things together, spend a lot of close time together. Yeah, and if there's any opportunity to laugh together, even better, you know. So,
Safiya, Kate's founder Ayan did some volunteering, and she sent me lots of pictures of cooking the last lockdown. Is she any good? Be honest. She's not here now.
I'm going to definitely comment Ayan, but I just want to add something to Mohammed. I think sadly there has been a lot of couples that have been extremely stretched, and their relationship really stretched to a point of being unhealthy. And so I think it's really important for people to know that domestic abuse, or does exist, and there is help out there, and we have had a lot of people, wallahi, and also what's interesting, actually, you can't profile someone who's having DV or domestic abuse or whatever that looks like. And abuse isn't just physical. He didn't hit her. It's not just about the hitting, and it can be the other way around, when men get emotionally, psychologically, or physically even abused. But it's just really important to realize, actually, there's been a lot of relationships that have ended, or very unhealthy, very toxic, and if your mental well-being is really important, and going back to the mental well-being that we were talking about, actually, if you're in a relationship like that, it's not good for you, and it's not good for your kids. Ask for help. There's lots of help out there. Again, my email is up there. If anyone, I will definitely try and connect colleagues. Tower Hamlets has obviously domestic abuse services. None of the colleagues speak Somali. Again, it's one of my campaigns to try and get Somali speakers, but definitely we can connect you and support you in terms of navigating through that. So just to kind of add on to that, it has been amazing for certain couples and relationships to flourish, but it's also been quite negative for many. Talking about Ayan, wow, what an inspiration. I tell you what, wallahi, I love her to bits, and she inspires me so much. She took the Fridays, so she was like, Fridays are mine, and she went off and she raised money, because we didn't have much money, and we only could cook like really healthy, obviously, but cheap. But she wanted hilib and baris every Friday for Islam, and she did a GoFundMe page. She got people to sponsor on her Twitter. So someone would sponsor a whole nef on a Friday. Remember, 200 meals are going out. And not would she only raise the money, but wallahi, she would go in the kitchen and she would say, no one is cooking the food, only she did. And the aunties would be chopping, and obviously our colleagues, some of them were from Canary Wharf, chopping onions and getting stuff ready. And she wanted her potatoes chopped a certain way. We had to do it how it was. But the food, wallahi, was amazing. When she stopped volunteering, the Islamists and Oddly said, something's changed with the food. This is not the normal Friday food we used to get. And so she's been such an inspiration, wallahi. She helped us get volunteers. Specifically, a brother, Dahir, I'll never forget, she connected us, and he has a taxi company, and he was able, and still actually through his company, still delivers certain meals. And so I think she's been such a huge motivation. And what she showed is true leadership. You don't have to be the ex-ambassador of somewhere, or you don't have, you could be someone who runs an amazing, successful organization like Cade, but you can still roll up your sleeves, get in the kitchen, cook, clean, and wash. And she left her kitchen immaculately. So wallahi, I love Ayan. No, she can't hear me, so her head hopefully won't get too big, which is...
I can hear you, Ayan. The kitchen's waiting. We have a second lockdown, so quickly.
That's it. So more than definitely, wallahi, she was amazing, absolutely fantastic. She was clockwipe. Her Friday sessions were struggling since she's gone. But I guess, again, it's about, people really knowing that I can do my bit and I can leave my stamp in terms of the history, and say, actually, I went above and beyond, and she most certainly did, mashallah.
Thank you. literally all the issues that Safiya touched on, whether you need help with domestic violence, academic intuition for your children, you know somebody vulnerable that needs to be feared, or somebody who's self-isolating, her email is on the chat. Please email her, and even if she can't help you personally, she'll connect you to somebody because she knows everybody. And may Allah reward you, Safiya, for all you do in East London. I'm just going to ask for any concluding comments from all the panelists, and then I think we can probably close. The questions are endless. Literally, people have sent so many questions, but I think we have to conclude at some point. Yeah, let's just do final. I do one more question each, or should we? Yeah, no, let's do the concluding comments. Mo, I think you're a former South Londoner, and people are asking, what do you think about people who say that East London is the lower tier part of London? I think that's your friends.
I'm not involved. No, I mean, the fact that I'm here, the fact that I think London is a very privileged place when compared. Of course, London is not perfect, but when compared to other parts of the country, we are in a very, very privileged position where, comparatively to the rest of the country, London has far more resources, access to. There's places in like the north of England that the nearest food bank is 2-3 miles away. You know, so there's so many channels. So that I take the privilege of being in London. But no, yeah, I'm a part-time East Londoner because I think I'm under pressure to move back to South. But I'm here now and I'm contributing to the community.
Professional answer.
Very PC answer. But no, I love being in East. East has really, in fact, I've been here for 3 years now and I haven't left East. It's testament to the opportunities available, access to the wider community, the Somali community here, and East London arts. East London arts is hard to match anywhere else in London. Honestly, doesn't come close.
I actually feel like all the art organizations and institutions are in East London, and then all the creatives are like in West London, South London. But you always,
to be honest, artistically, South is depleted when it comes to institutions. Whereas East London is, and look, I never knew about Somali Week Festival until I moved to East London. And that's like good 4 or 5 years. Well, honestly, never heard of it. I worked for Somali organizations in South London. Even then, still never came across Somali Week Festival and Cade until I moved to East. So it's only
positive. This is why I like doing this, because as well as trying to bring a little bit of joy and connectivity within our community, I mean, it's things like this within London, literally South London, East London. I can travel there within 15 minutes, but yet we're so disconnected and, you know, within our own little bubbles that don't tend to touch. And I think we could offer so many opportunities for particularly young people in our communities, whether it's mentorship, education, even help and services. If, you know, institutions, Somali institutions were a lot more connected. So yeah, we've got to do better, all of us, I guess. Ahmed, you're from Stratford. Stratford has seen lots of improvements in the last 8-9 years. Do you see a change since you wrote your poetry about where you grew up? Because now it looks shiny and
yeah, it is very shiny. I think I find myself having this discussion. I think it's the third time someone's asked me this question in about a week now, but I see a lot less brown faces, basically. So I grew up in Stratford for the last 20 years. From when we accepted the bid, when we won the bid for the London Olympics, seeing the kind of community and the people that lived here back then, and then looking at it now, there's definitely been a drastic change. And I think with any change, it's good and bad, and it's easy to dwell on the negative things, but there's definitely a lot of positives that happen. And I'm very lucky in the fact that there's an academy on my doorstep that my siblings can go to, and it is a top school.
Is that mine? I think the internet.
And it is a little bit less sense of community, but that's part and parcel of any part of London. I think it's really, I just try to focus on positive, to be honest with you, because I can sit here and list off a million bad reasons, but there's no reason to do that.
Okay, I think we can all conclude. You guys have been wonderful. Any last comments? Anything you want to add before we close tonight? Safiya?
I think what I would say is that volunteering is sadaqah, and so give your time, your intellectual, your profession, and get involved in positions of stakeholders have. So for me, I'm not only involved with being an independent police advisor and a board for Tower Hamlets Homes, and actually the BAME commissioner in Tower Hamlets as well, not because I get paid, not a penny at all, but because I can influence change and I can make sure that the needs of our community is heard. So please get involved in things. Tower Hamlets Council has been very productive by allowing, I guess, the task force or a Somali task force to be established. Get involved with that. And instead of sitting on the fence saying actually things are unfair or things could be better, get involved. If you want to get involved with WIT as well, that's something you can get involved in, whether it's involvement in our kids and our tuition. And actually young kids seeing young men like Mohammed and our brother who look like them, who are professionals in their own right, and hearing about them, that's the motivation and inspiration that they need to hear. So it's about being mentors to our young generation, whether you want to physically deliver stuff, whether you want to help us cook, there is so much to do, wallahi. Just say to yourself that I've got to be balanced with my personal needs as well as danta gutka that I spoke about before, and give back to your community. And so please volunteer, whatever that looks like, volunteer.
Thank you. Mohammed?
Yeah, I mean, Safiya has inspired me today to volunteer, and volunteering is one of my personality traits, I like to think, and I have been heavily involved in work in South London formerly, so volunteering is something I can massively advocate. Secondly, exercise. Obviously, my bias, working professionally in sports, but also just the opportunity to exercise now. If the opportunity is available, if you have the space, of course, these are real factors where families just can't, and that's totally understood. But depending on the measures, if there's a way that you can spend the weekends at least to exercise, massive, honestly, please do. It's so good for your health. It's so good for our elders. I know during the pandemic, my sisters who live with my mother, would go out for long walks near the park, and that's something that they never used to do before. But this is one where I've actually the genuine invested time for my mother and my father, who's come back from Somalia, in fact, to make sure they're still on their toes and their health and well-being is as best as it could be.
Ahmed?
I think what I would, inshallah, try to encourage anyone that is watching this, with what's coming in ahead with the lockdown, alhamdulillah, we have the experience of the first lockdown, so we may be able to, it's not as daunting as the last one was. So inshallah, try to use time ahead to, inshallah, improve yourself, to add to what Sister Safiya said and Mohammed said, use this time to not only just improve yourself in terms of your ability to talk to people. I would just reach out to friends and family and try to deepen those relationships as I could. Even journaling, something that I was able to pick up in the last lockdown, was able to allow me to keep my thoughts fresh, my mind clean, and just a good, healthy exercise, just for me anyway, to keep my mind fresh. So those are two things I definitely recommend for anyone that is looking ahead at what's to come in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you all so much. You are all fantastic. This has been absolutely heartwarming and beautiful. MashaAllah. May Allah preserve all of you and reward you for your efforts. The direct email of Safiya is safiya@wit.org.uk. You can go to their website, womeninclusiveteam.com. They have a Twitter page, Facebook. There is no reason for anybody to say they couldn't find them to volunteer. I'm expecting Safiya to tell me that they've had an influx of Somali people volunteering following this call, inshallah. Thank you so much once again for joining, and thank you to Tower Hamlets for commissioning this event on COVID in Tower Hamlets. I wish you guys all well. Be safe, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our partnership event with Tower Hamlet Council titled Resilience, the Aftermath of COVID-19 in East End London. The discussion has been vibrant. The artists have shared with us their talents and their poetry, and also how the lockdown and COVID as a whole has impacted them both as an individual, as an artist, and as a community. We have looked ahead to the looming second lockdown and the possible impact that it would have on our community in East End. And some of the measures we've discussed that we will be taking as a community and as individual organizations to try and meet the upcoming challenges. I particularly urge you to join the volunteer call by Safiya Jama's organization by going onto her social media and website, and please sign up. Thank you so much to our sponsor Tower Hamlets, to our panelists, to our guests and our attendees. Stay safe, and we see you soon.